Okay, I'll be dealing with the barriers to effective communication. So before we go to barriers, let's see what is communication and what are the types of communication.
எந்த சப்பாரா நான் அப்பப்ப சின்ன மெசேஜ் வைக்கிறேன்.
Communication is simply the act of transferring information from one person or a group of people to another person or a group of people. So whenever we are talking to each other, it may be one-on-one, or it may be one to a group, or it may be in a meeting, or it may be like we are communicating on this platform that's WebEx. It's all communication. I'm trying to transfer some information and some of my thoughts on the subject to you. So this may be by the spoken word, which I'm doing right now, or it could be through the written word. So you have some things written here on the presentation as well, and there will be subsequent images as well. So you'll be seeing them all and listening also simultaneously. And at the same time, what we miss out many times on a virtual platform is the non-verbal communications. So what I was telling you, that you should, many things you can make out by the person's expression. So whether the person in front is telling you something, is the way he is expressing it, is he telling it to you in an apathetic kind of way, he's just passing on a fact to you, or is it that he's trying to tell you something, he's very emotional about it, somebody said something bad to him and he's trying to complain to you about it, or is it that he's angry about it, or are you getting scolded? You can make out so many things by just looking at the person in front of you. So that is the non-verbal communication, and for that is what we miss many times when we're doing a virtual presentation as nowadays because of COVID. That's a body language. However, you are able to make out some amount of facial expressions, and by the way I intone my voice, you're able to make out whether I'm in a friendly kind of an atmosphere, or whether I'm annoyed, or whether I'm scared or angry. And of course, gestures. So again, when you're sitting down and the number of gestures we use are much less, these vary among various cultures as well. So after looking at communication, you see that words are only 10% of the message. So the remaining 90% is not only the words, it's what you hear. So like what I said, the clarity of the voice. Supposing somebody has got, for example, I'm a neurologist, so I'll speak in terms of stroke. So supposing somebody has got dysarthria, he's got spastic speech, the clarity will be reduced. So it will be difficult, he may be jumbling words into one another. Then how expressive, some people are more expressive, some people are dull, they just speak in a particular one tone voice, and so you will not be able to follow what they're saying. Then the facial expressions, how is the person in front of you dressed, what is their posture, are they slouching, are they sitting straight in their seat, are they standing straight, are they lying down and talking to you? So there are various parts of it. Then about whether the person is keeping an eye contact with you. Now, many times you can just make out whether many people wonder how their mothers make out whether they're telling lies or not. So my son often asks me, Mommy, how did you make out that I was lying? You can make out because the child isn't looking at you. He's trying, his eyes are shifting around here and there, his feet are shifty, he's wondering whether his mother will make out. So eye contact is so important. Then even when this touch is very important, especially when we are communicating with patients. Of course, nowadays we are not supposed to touch our patients, but on a general thing, when we go by the bedside and we just touch the patient, many times they feel very reassured that the doctor has come and they have actually been seen. So even the gestures that we say, whether we are angry, whether we are relaxed, we often tend to use our hands and hopefully not our legs while we are talking. But as we see that words are only 10% of the message. So what are the various barriers to communication? What are the reasons why interpersonal communications fail? Only when we know these barriers can we overcome the barrier. So the first, of course, is a language barrier, and there are many other barriers which I'll be coming to subsequently one by one. Cultural, psychological, physical, perceptual, attitudinal, and organizational. So at the different time points in a conversation, you may have different barriers. Also, there may be multiple barriers, because if there are multiple people, they may have multiple type of barriers which may be in the same room. And often these barriers lead to conflict among people and a lot of misunderstandings, which may remain with the people even after the conversation is over. So if something I have said hurts you, I may forget about it, but you may remember it even 20 years later when you meet me again. So these barriers and miscommunications are often the cause of many misunderstandings between not only between people, between groups, between departments, between institutions. So it's necessary to know that these barriers exist. So the first and the most common barrier is a language barrier. I think many of you will agree to this because many have come from different backgrounds and many have come from different states. So we are commonly using different languages, though we are using English and Hindi most commonly. But using many people who have studied in a Hindi medium find it difficult to express themselves in English. And those who are used to speaking only in English at home may find it difficult to communicate with patients in Hindi. So we used to see it very commonly when I have been born and brought up in Ludhiana, even though I'm a Malayali, and I studied in Christian Medical College. So we used to have people from all over the country. I had a class of 50 students. And I think maybe one or two people must have been from the same state. Everybody was from all over India. And many people had been used to speaking only in their mother tongues. So the first year was an interesting time when we were all trying to speak in English, trying to speak to one another, getting to know each other. So there were many things which came up. So people had different dialects. So even English, as you know, there are many different types of English which you get in India. One is the Hindi kind of English where you mix up various words. So I am just going to talk to someone. So मैं अभी बात कर ही रही हूँ. I may be speaking, and then you speak, and you mix up you mix up your English and you mix up your Hindi. Then there is a Malayali type of an English. I think a South Indian English is very commonly made out, and there are different dialects within the same. What is annotate? Approve it? The shared content. I will decline that. So the different dialects, even in Hindi, there will be different dialects in Hindi, so it may be difficult to understand. Of course, unfamiliar accents, these are something which really impair our listening. So if you're listening to a speaker from the United States, for example, maybe speaking in English, but the accent is so thick that many words you tend to miss, and you miss the entire sentence or the entire thought when you're unable to pick up that accent. Then another thing is the use of jargon. So we use medical jargon. So many times when we're communicating with each other, like for example on rounds, the patients, even if they're good and well versed in English, they may not be able to pick up many things because of the medical jargon and the lingo that we use. The same way, if we are sitting among computer experts, there are many things they'll say which we'll be totally left in the dark about. We won't know what they're saying. Of course, short forms. For example, one of my first year residents, when they had come 3 years back, he said that the patient had no history of Paltab. So I was like, Paltab? What is this? And then he says, no, ma'am, pulmonary tuberculosis. So I was like, okay, I could understand PTB and I understand pulmonary TB, but Paltab, that was a new one, but apparently it is used in some places. Then, supposing somebody came and told me that there was a child with MR and seizures, and I'm a neurologist, I would think of mental retardation. But if you told the same to a cardiologist that a child with MR and seizures came, they think MR was mitral regurgitation. So depending upon the context, we should be very careful to use short forms in communication, especially see the person in front and then use the short form. So if we are unable to speak in a particular language, it can lead to anxiety, it can lead to a lot of misunderstandings, and sometimes it can be funny. Funny for the listener, not so funny for the person who's speaking. So giving you an example, again, going back to medical school days, that I had a lot of people who were from Kerala and they were not used to speaking in Hindi. But supposing when we come to Punjab, you have to speak to the patients in Hindi and sometimes in Punjabi. So there were many funny things which happened. For example, a senior of mine, she once went during her first day of internship. We were taught before internship that we were supposed to inform the patients before touching them, before taking their samples. So this girl, she went up to this old Babaji who had cirrhosis of the liver because of alcoholism. And she had to take his morning samples, his counts, creatinine, LFT, and PT-INR. So she went with 4 little bottles in her hand and a syringe, a 10 cc syringe. And she went next to the patient and she woke him up, Babaji. And Babaji says, "Haan, madam." And she says, "Babaji, फिक्र मत करना, मैं छोटी सी सुई से आपकी खून कर दूंगी." So the Baba got so scared. He was like, "Madam, maaf kar dijiye, mujhe maaf kar dijiye." And what she wanted to say is, "मैं छोटी सी सुई से आपका खून लूंगी." So instead of that, it could lead to a lot of anxiety to the person whom she was going to interact with. The next barrier is, this is a technical barrier. The next barrier is a cultural barrier. So norms of communication vary from place to place. So supposing I communicate this way, maybe in England, it might not be very much appreciated. They are the people with a stiff upper lip, extremely formal, call them ma'am and sir, and speak in a very proper way. You are not supposed to be, all over the place. Some people are very touchy-feely when they are communicating, and it may not be appreciated by the other people. Some communities, like for example, the Spanish and the Hispanics, and many people from India also, we use a lot of gestures when we are talking to each other. We use our hands and we have various facial expressions. And as you understand that some people can make even a simple sentence very dramatic. Then even work cultures differ from place to place. For example, in some places, a strict hierarchy is followed, and in some places there is no hierarchy. So when people come from the places where there isn't a hierarchy, and they come into a system where there is a hierarchy, then the head of department might wonder why the resident is speaking to him in such an informal manner. But that may have been the way in where you work or where you have been brought up. And some people call people by name. For example, in my institute, we used to call people by their first names. And this used to be till around they were 5 years senior. And only when they were 6 years senior to you, we used to consider them adequately senior to be called ma'am and sir. Or we used to put a doctor before their name. So when I came here, I had a huge culture shock. And the people here had a huge culture shock, because one of my 4-year senior who was a PDF at that time, I called him Dr. Bhoi, and he was like, she called me by my name. And he would have preferred to be called boss or sir or something like that. So I learned on the job. So these are cultural barriers that we face when we go from one place or from one college to another. Then there are various psychological barriers which we have. And this is especially, I think, many of you, and some of you definitely would have stage fear, or they had social anxiety and shyness. So you find it difficult. What do I say? I mean, will I be able to say? And they become dumbfounded when people suddenly ask them. Many of us have faced this in interviews where we just find our mind blank and we just don't know what to say. And we're so afraid our feet are shivering and our hands are shivering and we don't know where to hide ourselves. So for that is why the podium was created, so that people wouldn't see your hands shaking and your legs quivering behind it. I think so that is why. And when we don't have podiums and we have to stand in front, then we have to overcome this stage fear and insecurity. So when you have fear, you often become self-conscious. What am I saying? What does the other person think of me? Do I look okay? Is my hair in place? Is my makeup fine? And you often forget instructions that you get during those times, and you come out of the interview thinking, मुझे कुछ याद नहीं है क्या हुआ था. Then some people are rude, and this makes people defensive. So we have to be very careful when we talk to others, the way we talk, the tone of our voice, that we shouldn't make the people in front of us defensive, because then it can impair communication between us and them. They may clamp up, they may refuse to tell us anything more. This is, of course, important to people who are like in the psychology and the psychiatry department, where you may see that the attitudes they have towards their patient are very different. They allow them to talk and they allow them to speak and they listen carefully and they're very encouraging. The people in front may be talking a whole load of nonsense, but they still just allow them to speak. So many of us are rude, especially when we have lack of time and patients ask us another question and we lose our temper and we say, एक बार बताया था ना आपको, नहीं समझ में आया आपको? तो obviously नहीं समझ में आया, तभी तो दोबारा पूछ रहे हैं. पर फिर what our rudeness puts off the next patient also, and then what happens is that many times our communication with them, which is so important, especially for medications, may be impaired. Then supposing the person in front of us is not communicating, always consider that they may have a psychological issue. Maybe they are shy or maybe they're even depressed, because depressed people tend to be uncommunicative, they tend to be rude, they tend to be annoyed easily, and they tend to be very touchy. So there are various psychological barriers to effective communication. Then there are emotional barriers. So the emotional IQ of a person, or the EQ, what they call it, it determines the ease and comfort of communication. So you need some amount of passion for the subject and some amount of emotion to be able to communicate your thoughts to others. For example, supposing I find something wrong, I should be able to have enough emotion to be able to communicate that so that the person in front of me is also able to grasp the intensity of the issue. But however, overpowering emotions like anger, it can impair communication. Somebody is shouting at you. There are two options, one to shout back or to quietly listen. And very often, both of them, the shouting can worsen the argument and the quietly listening may just provoke the person to shout more. So these emotions can impair communication. Of course, if a person's grieving about something, maybe they wouldn't be able to communicate so many issues. And many of us who have dealt with grief and sadness find that when our minds are clouded by emotions, we are not able to say all that we would like to say. Many times, so many things are missed out, both in speaking and in understanding. Then we look at the physical barriers. These are important, especially when we are both, as in a virtual platform, that's the technological impairments and the barriers. So these are usually environment related and they impair effective communication. For example, supposing there is a defective instrument. My laptop is keeping on hanging. So I will not be able to, proceed with my presentation properly. So I'll start getting hassled after some time. It's hanging. I don't have time. It's going to take away my time, which I have to communicate with you. Then poor signals, of course, you get these no Wi-Fi signals, which can horrify you, especially if you're in the middle of a lecture, or even if you're in the middle of an interesting talk, which you were wanting to listen to, and poor signals make it difficult for you to be able to understand what the other person is saying, and you completely lose the flow. Then supposing there is background noise. Now, this is very important in a classroom. If you have a huge classroom and one teacher speaking and there are three children whispering and snickering at the back, we would rather our mind and our ears will go to what are they saying, and you often miss what the teacher says. Also, the teacher gets confused and, it impairs the entire thing. So she has to keep saying, keep quiet, and the more you say keep quiet, the more the children snicker. So it's background noise can confound the message, what is being told to you. Then if there's poor lighting, especially on a virtual platform, it would be difficult to make out the non-verbal communications. And even in a big hall, if there's poor lighting, we wouldn't be able to see the person, his expressions. And of course, in a large room, if you're trying to shout out, maybe the people in the front would be able to hear you clearly. But if you do not have a microphone, the people at the back may not be able to listen to your message completely. So these are personal related physiological barriers, that is hearing impairments. Of course, there's no need to explain this. If somebody is impaired by hearing, they'll be lip reading you. So I feel that with the masks, the people nowadays with the coronavirus, people who have hearing impairments will have so much of difficulty in understanding what you say because they're not able to lip read. And even visual impairments can impair, especially during presentations, during PowerPoint presentations. If you're unable to see clearly, you're unable to communicate. Even if you're unable to see important things, especially this is important for people who are teaching mathematics and physics and those who are teaching with diagrams, you should be able to see what they are saying, how they are solving. Only then you can go ahead. Speech problems, that is dysarthria. So supposing somebody has a difficulty in speaking or they have a difficulty in enunciating their words. So you've got various different types of dysarthria. So when you come to neurology, you'll be able to understand the various types and see the various type of speech problems which people have, which impair communication. Of course, dyslexia is something which impairs communication. If I have to quickly read and then I have to explain it to you, or I have to read something while I'm speaking to you, people who are dyslexic often find it difficult to do it quickly and to communicate. So all these physiological barriers prevent interpretation both of verbal, visual, and non-verbal clues. But however, these person-related impairments can be overcome with training. So people who are deaf, they learn to lip read. So they are able to make a very good attempt. They are able, many times you may not even make out that the person is deaf because they are able to lip read you so beautifully if you speak the language that they are comfortable with. So what are perceptual barriers? I think or who has seen married people will be able to agree with me. This is making assumptions, jumping to conclusions before listening to everything the speaker has to say. Men say that women do this all the time, that even before they have said it, the women would have already jumped to the conclusion what they would have said, and it often leads to marital conflicts. So people often hear what they want to hear. So whatever you may say, they will listen to part of what you say, take it out of context and hear only what they want to hear. So they may jump to various conclusions which may be false, and it leads to many misunderstandings. Also, the same message, supposing, for example, I give you a particular instruction, it may be interpreted by 5 different people differently, depending upon how they listened to it or how they heard it, whether they heard the entire thing or they didn't. Then what are these attitudinal barriers which are there? Some of the people are very expressive. If you ask them something, they'll immediately tell you. But some people will not tell you. So we have this problem many times, even when when we deal with our residents, for example. Some of them, if somebody says something or they're upset about something, they'll come and tell you that, madam, this is what happened and I'm feeling bad about it. But some people, you have to dig it out of them. You have to ask them, kya hua? Bataiye. So they'll be worried. They will be introvert. They would not like to tell you. Many times they may not tell you. Even after asking for days, you may never come to know what their problem is, and they'd rather be left alone. But we must be careful, and we should make sure that if there are people like this, we should include them and not let them be very introverted. People should be able to speak about their feelings. Otherwise, it could lead to many complications. Then some people are very egoistic. So if I have said something, maine kaha to kaha, and you can't touch that, it's okay. I'm touchy and defensive about everything I say. So supposing somebody asks me a question, I don't like it because I said it and it should be accepted for what it is said. Then some people are inconsiderate for the feeling of others. So they're not bothered about what the person in front is thinking. They would say it anyway. So we must be very careful to make sure that the people, so this is what the non-verbal clues are about. When we say something, we can see from their eyes and from the face of the person opposite you, whether they have taken offense, whether they're upset about what you're saying, and either we backtrack or we apologize. Many times we don't mean to hurt other people, but we do it unawares. So in that case, it's best to apologize and backtrack and to repair relationships before the day is over. Then some people are selfish. They don't care about what the other person thinks anyway. So मुझे अपना काम से मतलब है, अब मेरा काम होना चाहिए, आपको जो भी लगा, it's okay. I don't care about what you think. So that could be a barrier in communication, and you'd be careful speaking to those people again. Then supposing some people do not have motivation. They do not have the motivation to listen for a lecture, but they have to take the lecture anyway because they have to get those number of points. So they would join it anyways, and they would just go through the motions of the thing, but they're not really motivated. But supposing there's something you'd like to learn, supposing there's a cooking class you'd like to take, or perhaps there is some sport you'd like to join, you'd be highly motivated if you wanted to do it on your own. So lack of motivation is often a barrier. Then some people are resistant to change. So no matter what you say, it's like water falling off a duck's back. It's not going to make a difference. After 2 or 3 times, you recognize these kind of people and you realize it's no point telling them anything. Then there are various organizational barriers. So in an organization like ours, in an institution, you can make out. So when you start, it's delays, many delays in communication because the communication has to progress through proper channels. So this may be written or it may be even verbal. So a strict hierarchy may make it difficult for people, employees lower down, to approach top officials. So they have to tell their immediate superior and depend upon them to convey to their superiors. So many times we don't come to know the viewpoints of our Safai Walas, for example. They may not find it easy to get to the director. So then they form their own unions and it becomes a big mess. Then rigid rules and cumbersome procedures may make you feel that it's better just to be quiet and to just palate that rather than, say something against it, because the procedure is so cumbersome to complain that I'd rather keep quiet. Then I don't know how many of you have played this game in childhood, Chinese Whispers. So we used to play it and we used to come up with interesting results. So there used to be a group of children. We used to usually play it at birthday parties, and a group of children, maybe around 15 children, and somebody goes and whispers something into the one child's ear, and they are supposed to whisper it across. By the time it reaches out from the last child is supposed to speak, and it may be completely different to what was told to the first child. So very often, remember, if you are listening to a hearsay, if you haven't directly heard a conversation, remember Chinese Whispers. Remember that may not be what that person has said at all, because every person who's passing on that message would add a little bit of namak masala to it, and the end message may be distorted. So confirm for yourself what the fact is before confronting the person. Then there are speaker-related issues. Giving too many examples, being vague. So this can lead to confusion. So this is usually people are vague when they're not sure of the topic. So when they're not sure of the topic, they, brush around it, go around this way, that way, so that nobody would be able to find fault with them. So they tend to deviate from the topic. So also lack of confidence can lead to various issues in the speaker, especially if they're not confident about themselves, about the topic that they're given to. So when you want to communicate, or if you have been given a topic, you need to make sure that you know all about it, or make sure you have a good understanding of what you're going to say, so that you are not lacking in confidence or knowledge. So if you are vague and long drawn, it can lead to unclear message and misinterpretation of what you're saying. Also, some people have a tendency to be monotonous. There are some people who I used to think that when they were speaking, did they really have Parkinson's? The way they were speaking was so dull and in a single monotone that it's difficult to continue listening to what they're saying. So other constraints are a shortage of time. So supposing I have to say, I have what I want to say, I would take 20 minutes, but I've been given only 5 minutes. I wouldn't be able to constrict it into that. So then I'm told from the back, somebody is saying time, and I would like rush in many thoughts at one go, and I would not make myself understood. So supposing A lack of interest. A lack of interest could be on the part of the speaker or could be on the part of the listener. So this is often seen in a classroom where you find some of your students sleeping, and we often think that the person in the front would be the one who would be the most attentive, but many times you find the person in the front is the one who is most asleep. Also, supposing the topic is irrelevant to the listener. So, for example, there is somebody speaking on computer education, and that really doesn't. I'm not interested in doing a a course in computers, so I may not listen to it carefully. So, how to overcome these barriers? So you may have to overcome these barriers either when you're a speaker or when you're a listener. So, Ravi Kumar, perhaps you could put your mic off because it's slightly distracting. As a speaker, we should be clear about the content of our message. So if you're not sure, for example, we're junior